Hi guys, DevilHunterXYZ, and it's movie review time, and this time I went to see Star Wars Rogue One. And I gotta admit, I was kind of surprised by this movie. Originally I thought this was going to be just one of those standalone Star Wars movies that's just there to fill in the time for the next release of the future trilogy. But this actually does shed some more backstory onto the events of Episode 4. And it kind of actually explains a lot more than what the actual episode itself actually done. So let's take a closer look at it. Well, for the summary of Rogue One, it's kind of a little bit on the lengthy side. It starts out. Well, the movie starts out surprisingly without the traditional Star Wars credits, Star Wars opening credits, and I'm not really too surprised by it. I mean, this is not an official installment of the trilogy, so this is like a side story. Remember that. But anyway, in the opening, you see the Imperial Army landing on a planet, and they were trying to get in contact with a research scientist, Galen Erso, and they were trying to urge him to help finish building the Death Star. Because remember, this is still before Episode 4. The Death Star hasn't been completely built yet. But of course, he refuses, and because he didn't want his wife or his daughter be part of the whole war or whatever. Unfortunately, his wife gets shot during the confrontation, and then their daughter Jin manages to escape from the Imperial Army, hides out somewhere, and is eventually rescued by a rebel extremist, Saw Gerrera. Then the movie jumps 15 years afterwards, and I guess at that time we do see an Imperial pilot kind of defecting from the Empire itself, trying to bring a message to Gerrera on what was it called? I think it was Jeddah. I think it was called the planet Jeddah. I mean, there were just a lot of planets in this, but anyway. In the meantime, Jin Erso, the daughter, she ends up being captured for quite some time for various crimes. Really hasn't been elaborated or whatever, but she does get rescued by a group of rebels, and of course, the one who was leading that whole rescue operation was Officer Cassian Andor. I think that's what his name was. And really, the whole goal was to try to rescue Jin, and they were going to use her as a way to try to find Galen to learn more about the whole Death Star, because obviously they somehow know about the whole Death Star, the giant planet destroyer. Alright, so Jin, Cassian, and they also have an Imperial droid that's been reprogrammed. His name was K2SO. It's called K2 for short. They traveled to Jeddah to try to they were trying to see if they can locate Galen. And while there, they do meet up with a bunch of other rebels. I mean, the only two that really stuck out was Imwe, some blind rebel soldier, and then also his companion Malbus. And eventually they do manage to make contact with Saw Gerrera, and they manage to view the message that was given to him by that pilot Rook, and it turned out to be a hologram of Jin's father, kind of saying that the Death Star's design has a flaw in it. It has like a secret flaw in it that none of the Imperial troops know about, and so he kept it a secret because he despised building it. He never wanted to build in the first place. But whether he was going to take part of that plan or not, it was still going to be built either way. So he figured he'd leave a weak point on it for the future, if any case. And that there are plans for the Death Star on another planet, Scarif, I think it was called. But anyway, after viewing the whole hologram stuff, we do see the Death Star completed above the atmosphere of Jeddah, and it actually manages to shoot a laser into the planet, kind of blowing it up, and then basically everyone had to scatter around and flee off of the planet as quickly as they can. Yeah, then eventually they make it to another planet, Edu. Yeah, and that's where they actually find Galen, Jin's father, and pretty much Galen's. I guess pretty much Galen was just admitting to all of his responsibilities, all the action he's done. While being part of the Empire, and to his colleague, his Empire colleague, Krennic, the one who was trying to get him to join in the beginning. Unfortunately, Galen does get killed off, but before then, Jin does reunite with her father. Before leaving off to try to see if they can find a way to get to the Death Star, or get the plans for the Death Star to the Alliance. Alright, so Jin tries to propose a plan to steal the schematics for the Death Star, but of course the Alliance really disapproved of the whole plan. So she, along with some other rogue rebels, they decided to initiate the plan on themselves. Hence giving the name Rogue One. Yeah, so they decided to fly out there to Scarif, where the plans for the Death Star are being kept. And while there, Jin, Cassian, and K2 disguise themselves as some of the Imperialists to try to sneak onto the base. And at the same time, the rebels were there trying to create a distraction for Jin and the others to try to locate the schematics for the Death Star. And of course, it's pretty much like an ongoing war going out there for quite some time. A lot of people being sacrificed. Lose a lot of great people there. In the end, though, Jin manages to get her hands on the schematic before being confronted by Krennic, who tries to stop her, but unfortunately he gets shot down by Cassian. And so they managed to get their hands on the schematic and try to radio in the Alliance. Send them the information, the schematics of the Death Star to the rest of the Alliance. But unfortunately, as soon as they did that, the Death Star approaches within the atmosphere and destroys the entire planet of Scarif, thereby pretty much killing off everyone there. So all the main characters gone. And in the last few minutes of the movie, we do see a bunch of the other Alliance, a bunch of the other rebels scattering around trying to get into hyperspace, and then you do see Darth Vader showing up, disposing the rebels and trying to get their hands on the Death Star plans. But luckily, the rebels managed to escape, or some of them did manage to escape with the plans. And interestingly, you kind of see like some of the opening of Episode 4, as you see the rebels handing Princess Leia the Death Star plans, saying that this is supposed to represent our new hope. Well, for pros, I guess for one thing immediately is when it comes to Star Wars, this has to be the action. A lot of firefights, a lot of explosions. You do see like a whole space wars going out there. So yeah, it's pretty impressive, all the space combat and whatnot. I guess the only downside was just there's no lightsaber duels. Remember, this is after Episode 3, so Order 66 has already been established, so there's hardly any Jedis. Or I'm assuming there's hardly any Jedis. I really can't be 100% sure on that. Anyway, the second thing I liked, the second pro, I have to say, I actually did like the cameo appearances. Granted, a lot of it was just computer generated, but it's just having some of the voiceover work and stuff like that. We have Bail Organa, Princess Leia's father. We had C-3PO, R2-D2. We had Darth Vader, still voiced by James Earl Jones, surprisingly. And then, of course, you had a CGI of Princess Leia, which could be debatable if people even like that or not. The third pro, I would have to say the story. Overall, the story was pretty simple because it was really about the rebels trying to get their hands on the plans for the Death Star, to try to destroy it. And it was basically that whole premise, just trying to find the one who made the Death Star, trying to get the plans for it, and also try to bring it out to the Alliance so that they can plan for the war. In a way, it kind of almost reminds me of the the animated show Star Wars Rebels. In some ways, kind of reminds me of that. And I also kind of like the fact that it kind of leads into the events of Episode 4, because if you think about it, if it wasn't for the brave sacrifice of all these rebels, including Jin and Cassian and K2, I mean, then basically the events of Episode 4 probably wouldn't even happen. Well, for cons, there are a couple of things that stick out to me immediately. For one, it'd probably be the vast amount of locations. I mean, I guess it's good to see the whole galaxy that the whole Star Wars universe takes in, but I mean, throughout this entire film, we must have jumped to like 5 or 6 different locations. Maybe spending about 10 to 15 minutes in each or something like that. So it just kind of gets a little too much. I mean, like we hardly had any time to adjust into these new locations, so it kind of gets a little bit worn out after a while. And second, I would have to say is the somewhat forced humor, I guess. Kind of somewhat with the same issue as with the Force Awakens. They try to add humor into it. I mean, it kind of works, but it kind of somewhat takes you out of it too. Mostly from K2. He obviously is kind of more sarcastic. He jokes around sometimes. I mean, he's even more. He's kind of even more on the slightly annoying side than C-3PO. So I mean, I guess it's okay for humor's sake, but I mean, I don't really go to a Star Wars movie to see humor. I'm kind of wanted to see the action to it. I kind of wish it was kind of more like the original trilogy or even the prequel trilogy. Just kind of keep it consistent. Not try to force humor into the movies. Well, overall, I say Star Wars Rogue One is, and as I said before, is a pretty interesting side movie to the whole Star Wars franchise. I mean, it's not like I don't really think it's like a gimmicky movie that they were just trying to milk money off of the consumers. I actually think that they went out of their way to try to actually further tell the story, and kind of further give some more backstory, some more details onto the events that lead up into the original trilogy. Which I'm kind of grateful for that, because I always kind of wonder what, I mean, what happened between the events of Episode 3 and 4, because I believe there's about like almost a 20-year gap or so between those time frames. So I mean, it was good to know something about it, and also the events leading into Episode 4. So I guess it's more to know that a lot of people were risking their lives to try to bring new hope to this into the galaxy. And overall, I say this movie is actually it's right up there. It's actually a pretty good one for the year, and I'd actually recommend seeing this one whenever you can. Granted, when I saw it, it was in 3D, but honestly, there really wasn't anything too 3D about it. So I would just say stick with the traditional 2D whatever, because you're not really missing much with going 3D. But anyway. For a final score, I'll give Star Wars Rogue One I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a pretty good movie, and like I said, it's really worth your time watching it. Further kind of give some more details for the whole Star Wars universe. All right, well, this is DevilHunterXYZ, and until next time.